And I hope that their first child be a masculine child.
Eric, welcome back.
Welcome.
Was your winter solstice extravaganza good?
Yeah, at least I had the excuse of the holidays to put away, all of the obligations and things I need to achieve this year out of mind for a bit. And now that we've hit January 12th, it's time to play catch up and adjust to the world.
Indeed. In fact, one of those ways you did that was by buying me hot wine and meat pockets.
Yes, actually, we should discuss. First off, everyone, welcome to episode 3.
This is the Annoyed Masculinity, the podcast, where Eric reminded me very nicely there that we are, two friends who like to talk to each other about what annoys us about the current social state and narrative around the idea of what it is to be a man, masculine, and how we think there's some pretty garbage ideas out there. And we do this because we're bored, but also because we don't like the idea of living in a world where masculinity is defined by people who may or may not be sex criminals, people who definitely are weird dorks, and grifting hustle bros, tech fascists, etc. It seems more like they're just effete children walking around in dad's shoes, playing at the idea of manhood instead of living the ideals of what it is to be masculine or manly and all these things. And the whole goal of all this, listeners, watchers, if you're doing the remote viewing thing that the CIA allegedly did or did not do, however you're receiving this, we want to stave off the seeding of the defining manhood to said dork-ass losers. I have nothing but my voice and the ability to con my friends into talking into microphones for an hour at a time with me. And so that is what I will use to help with that.
I was excited.
Yes, Eric was excited.
He didn't con me. He was very upfront with, how this was going to go. True. And we are still in the learning phases.
Oh, yeah. This is episode 3.
Part 2.
Yeah. So the ultimate goal is to provide a robust alternative to the ideas of all the people that we don't like and the people that annoy us. And to, let people know there's a different way of being a guy out there. You don't have to be an alpha male hustle bro. You don't have to be a coach for a gym lifting coach, whatever it is that Ashton Hall does. You don't have to be remarkably obsessed with crabs while sounding like Kermit the Frog, like Jordan B. Peterson. I do respect Andrew Tate's tuck job. I've seen worse tuck jobs on professional drag queens, but I respect nothing else about the man.
I will say there are people we don't like, but that we could like. We just don't like certain things about them or their beliefs, because that's why you mentioned guys that have never felt any real hardship. I think, to be fair, there are people that have experienced hardship, and there's a lot of men experiencing hardships, but it's where does the blame's a harsh word, but where does the blame lie, or what is the root cause of this? And if you are misdirecting that blame instead of taking accountability, will your situation ever actually change? And the answer to that is no. But I don't think. We met, if you've listened to the earlier episodes, we met back in college, Navy or OTC.
We both thought we wanted to be Navy officers.
Yeah. And so, and I think that's a lot of friends, Navy officers these days, I have my regrets. But point is, when we were younger, I know we both believe certain things that I wouldn't really my younger self, but
young me would look at current me and be like, what the fuck happened? This guy's kind of cool, but what the fuck happened?
I mean, I hadn't seen you since, it had been about 20 years, and I was like, oh, yeah. Hey, Jack.
Yeah, definitely.
But I like you even more. So not that I didn't like you back then, but I like this version.
Oh, yeah. I like me more. God, my wife and I were talking about that last night, actually, about if life had taken a different path, I could have ended up getting a job with Customs and Border Patrol. She's like, oh, we wouldn't be married. I'm like, I'm aware of this. But it was the best thing that I could have gotten aside from going to Iraq and Afghanistan when I was a reservist. So I was like, I can go play the Hunger Games here. I can go be a dickhead on the border there. You do what you do to get out. Thankfully, he was able to go do violence elsewhere instead of. Actually, I didn't really even do that much violence. I drew dicks on everything. Kids, join the Marines, see the world, draw dicks on everything. It's part of the culture.
Goes back to the Roman
Goes
army.
back to ancient Rome.
Yeah.
And that, along with the gayest thing I've ever seen in my life, is what straight Marines do when they're bored. So, yeah.
So I'm still trying to get you to play rugby, Jack. You know, maybe we can.
My knees. I left my knees in Afghanistan.
Get you the well. You don't need good knees to play Division IV men's rugby. Come on. You think I'm an athlete?
I think this might be the equivalent to the league at which Andrew Tate is a kickboxer in. Not the one where he got his shit knocked fuck out of him a couple weeks ago, but like the thing that he was like, "Oh, I'm a pro kickboxer." I'm like, "You're a kickboxer in a league that holds its matches in abandoned Kmart's." Like, it's not like
where else would you? I mean, like that's actually, you know, that's like the vibe. Anyways, everyone, you know, the tangents are part of this. You know, we are just having a conversation, and especially as we get older, it is hard to catch up quite as frequently. So that's always part of each episode. See what's going on with everybody. So expect this one to maybe be somewhat on, but no promises.
Not the topic for this episode, but you can see the ink on my hand. I've been playing with my new inks. Not the topic of this episode, but something that plays into is a supporting character in most of these things is that male loneliness. The way you deal with male loneliness, dear listener, watcher, remote viewer, however you're receiving this, is to find a friend and go say, "Hi, how you doing?" That's it. That's how you solve the loneliness problem. You stop being lonely. You take action. You go do it. And it's really as simple as saying, "Hey, what's up, dude? Haven't talked to you for a while." In the case of Eric and I, is, "Hey, what's up, dude? I lost my job. Do you know anyone who's hiring?"
Hey, it brings people together.
Also, let me tell you how much I hate capitalism. But turn into this. But it's still, you know, that's what it is, listeners. You gotta go out and say hi to people. And it's really like, if you're afraid of being like weird or strange about it, I'm a weird and strange guy. Most people who've met me in person can attest to that. Find people who are weird and strange in the way that you're weird and strange, and then you're not weird and strange. You're just normal. So, anyways, Eric, do you care if I leave this one off?
Please.
So, because I am a 40-year-old corporate drone who has like the social and a dad, I have no social life. My social life includes watching lots and lots of Disney cartoons with my daughter and talking about work things at work, occasionally bugging you via text message. But yeah, I'm not out and around a lot of people, and when I am, it's certainly not young people, not young men. And so I receive a lot of my information about like, because part of the thesis of the show when I was pitching it to you was like, my whole angle was, what the fuck is wrong? What happened? Like, how did we get to here? And a lot of that is a part of my reason for wanting to do a lot of this is that I just don't fucking understand. Like this, I get that life is hard. We live in America. It's designed to take every penny you own. But some of the stuff that I read is just like bananas to me. And I understand, like, you know, eventually you get old, Grandpa Simpson, it'll happen to you. It's a thing that happens. Times change, you know, the world changes. I get that. But I don't understand how we got to the point where it's apparently a crisis. And so I have to rely on social media, YouTube videos, and the news as much as it exists. A lot of traditional media stuff that writes about it. The problem with that is that it always ends up being a battle for clicks and eyeballs. And so is this really a thing that's a problem, or is this a thing that everyone wants to make a problem so that we can get ad revenue? I'm not here to say one way or the other than that I understand that enough young people seem to believe it is an issue for them, that it is to some extent a problem for them. Whether or not it is a problem in the wider sense of the entire population. That's a long-winded corporate way of saying, I'm not dismissing your problems and your issues. I just don't think I understand them.
So I'm the liaison to the youths here, which I do forget that there may be people actually watching this. So they just see me vape throughout it. That's thanks, Superman.
And I quit when my daughter was born, so it's the only reason I don't have one. It's the only reason you don't hear a bag inflating behind me from a volcano.
I just don't have I can see you'd blow clouds. I bet you blew clouds, didn't you? It's not like my
I never did
here.
much. I was not a big fan. I find it annoying. I have no problem with you inhaling strawberry, banana flavored, whatever. I don't want to
cola slush. Yeah, I did used to smoke cigarettes back when I was cool.
Oh yeah, I used to smoke Marlboro Reds and Camel Whites.
Oh yeah,
and then for a small amount of time, the Marlboro Menthols. Never really got into those, just didn't like the flavor. But Black and Milds. I switched to Black and Milds when I was overseas because they'd burn forever. I was maybe the only guy in the world at any given time smoking Black and Milds that didn't just pull all the tobacco out and replace it with weed.
I was like,
I was just straight up smoking pipe tobacco.
Yeah. I was a method, yeah, but there's some functionality. I was like I won't get myself in trouble in here technically, but why I used to smoke Parliament Lights back in one period of my life. But there's menthols, but we came from the Jarum Black era, and that was
man, I do enjoy some cloves. It's probably the one thing I could still get away with smoking.
they're not the same though, and that's kind of actually a tie into the show. Yeah, no, so they don't. So the Jarum Black. So for anybody listening that was not around or does not really remember the early to mid 2000s, the trend at the time was, so this is back when a lot of people still smoked, high school, college, were these clove cigarettes. I believe they're Turkish, probably Turkish or something like that.
Yeah.
But they were black. They came in a black box. But they're
close. They just looked cool as fuck. And then they actually tasted good too.
They tasted good. They smelled good. Like allegedly they burned holes in your lungs, but that was like a separate thing.
I mean,
I don't
stuff
know.
Is cancer causing.
Yeah, all this stuff. But they went away. So they got banned for a bit because there was they were getting rid of flavored cigarettes.
Oh,
kind of like the war on flavored vapes. Yeah, but not menthols because that would have caused unrest. But sure. But then they came back, and it was like several years ago I saw them and tried them, but they I know that perception changed with time, but they were definitely different, not the same. So I looked it up. They aren't the same anymore. So
that sucks.
Kids, I'm not telling you to smoke, but if you do, the Jarum Blacks aren't as good as they used to be. But this is grounded in, it kind of gets to the point is like,
the weed used to be better, man.
Yeah, I know. I wasn't as strong. I can't do this stuff lately. But, things were different for us back in the day. There were a lot of things that were better. Don't get me wrong, but not better for everybody. Like there were a lot of people, society that things were not good for. 90s, the 2000s. But it's just, we come from certain perspective when we were a certain age is different from the times now. So that's why it's on our end trying to also better understand, what you guys are going through.
Yeah, absolutely. And so tie that all together, the biggest thing that points out, watched a couple different videos. Scott Galloway, a man that I will agree with 90% of the time, but the other 10% makes me want to just dangle him by his ankles over edge of a bridge, being like, "You fucking believe this? Are you telling me that you believe this shit, Scott?" And then in a completely unactionable way, "Scott, you have way more money than I do, and please do not sue me. You seem like a nice fellow. I just don't like your ideas on how little young people are fucking each other." And then it wasn't More Perfect Union. There was a video I watched. They interviewed a bunch of younger guys. They're all under 30, and they had a lot of things to say that, God, it reminded me of 2009 in terms of how hard it was to find a job, economic outlook and all that, which I could speak at length about because that was before I had any amount of what I would call success in my life, and life was not easy. I get that. But the biggest thing was that there's just this lack of direction of what a man is supposed to be and do in 2025. And I guess how I agree with this in so much of, nothing in life is beyond change. That's kind of the only constant in life. I get that it's difficult to find your way as a young person. I certainly had issues with that. Dawn of the internet, rural Indiana, don't know much outside of that, trying to find my way in the world. It was hard. I have no doubt that it is difficult. When I think about trying to explain how to explain the world to my daughter, it's just I have no clue. I'm just gonna have to eventually tell her, when she asks me what to do with her life, I'm like, "Kid, I don't know. The world's changed too much since I was doing this stuff. So I can help you figure it out, but I can't tell you what to do." There's no
just
right
walk
answer.
In there and shake their hands. Don't leave until the boss comes out, and that's how you get a job.
I know you're joking, but that is literally what my dad's advice was when I was job hunting as a young man.
Yeah,
and it's Dad,
boomer dad. We have older dads.
I would walk in, try that, and I'd walk right back out because they told me to go to a website. This was in the mid 2000s. This wasn't even recently. It's been that way for a while. And he just didn't grasp the concept that you couldn't just a firm handshake and a smile and the willingness to trespass a property after you've been told to leave and the willingness to annoy the boss in that way wouldn't get you a job.
The point is we've been through Out of Touch, listen to Out of Touch people too, which is why, again, engage with us if we are out of touch. Yeah.
But the other thing is that I don't see that as limited to men. Women experience the same thing. What is limited to men is how young men are defining the solution and then trying to enact it. And that's not to say all men. Two of the younger people at work, one's 26, I think the other one's 25. They clearly have their shit together. They don't have these issues, but I don't think they're representative of most people. In fact, I can tell you just one specifically isn't. He is a very, very talented young guy, and he's like, if you look at him as the example of what all young men are like, it's like, no, this is just not it.
In fairness, though, I wouldn't say they're necessarily defining things. It's people our age, like, guys, a lot of these grifters and stuff, come from our age, Gen X, and it's just so like it's who they're being listened to, what they're being fed. But we can talk about it somewhere later. But I put responsibility on our age defining it. Yeah,
I actually had lunch with one of the guys. And I was like, why are things the way they are? Can you please explain this to me? The thing that's hard for me is that he basically explained they're raised by the internet. It's like, so was I, but it was the old internet. It wasn't the new internet. Being raised by something awful is different than being raised by YouTube, I guess.
So we saw a lot of, it was more shocking back then.
Yeah. There was no one trying to convince me to become a Nazi, but there were lots of people willing to let me watch people get their heads cut off with a pocket knife. So take that how you will.
Because it wasn't an industry so much, right? The thing is, it's like
we hadn't figured out how to monetize anything.
Yeah.
No, and that's why it was better, because there was no money in it. It was seen as just a black hole, a money pit, especially after the .com bust. So the internet wasn't monetized at that point. It was when we still looked at cookies as like, well, yeah, this is how the mechanics of the program works, not as something that you use to track someone for the rest of their life.
There were things you deleted after looking at porn and didn't want your dad to find out when he checked all that. Did you clear out the relevant cookies and history? This is how we learned computers, though. Yeah.
I just, from my old habits of data sanitization of the space I'm in, all of my browsers are set to just drop all that shit every time I close them. Like it gets amnesia every time I close a window. But yeah, so like I get it. Life is difficult, and not in ways that are dissimilar to things when I was 20 to 25. Not necessarily as dire as back then, because the internet, smartphones, the way we communicate with each other and everything has come a long way, but it's still rough. Where I disagree with a lot of what they had to say was that they feel like they've been left behind by life, the universe, and everything. The Democrats don't speak to them. Corporations don't care about them. Even the Boy Scouts let girls in now. One of the examples was that if you go to the Democrats' website, they used to list like something like 30 different groups of people that they are, have their mind on wanting to support. None of it is gendered. I don't think. In mine, one might be like unmarried mothers or something like that. I don't fucking know. It's been a while since I looked at the list. But like, if you looked at the list and you didn't see specifically men, like nothing about that should say, well, these guys don't give a fuck about me, because all these other categories are things that you could fall into. It's like, well, why do we have to specifically tell you that we're here for you if we have 3 other groups that we're here, that you're fall into, that we're also trying to support? Corporations with diversity, equity, and inclusion. I had friends who I was like, you know better than to have the complaints you're having right now, because we'd go through, we'd do like the DEI stuff during annual training, and they'd complain about how they were just being told they're bad for being white. Like, no, nothing in here said you're bad for being white or a man. What it is saying is that these other people have been disadvantaged, and we recognize that, and we're going to try to work to do that and make that better, and that you specifically weren't a part of that, but you might have some unconscious biases from your life and existence. I certainly did. That would cause this to make work less comfortable and welcoming to other people. That's not a corporation saying, we don't care about white guys anymore. It's a corporation saying, we have a lot of people here and we need to make everyone as comfortable as the most comfortable people. And with the Boy Scouts, part of that was a huge issue with them not being able to retain anybody, because for years the Boy Scouts of America did not clean house every time they had an issue with an instance of sexual assault on a minor by a trusted adult in the troop. They faced decades of declining numbers, and they let girls in so they could survive as an organization, but also because we are the only, I think it's Russia was the only other country with a scouting organization that was segregated by gender. Every other scouting organization in the world, it's co-ed. Like, when I was at...
But don't worry, they brought young pioneers back to help with the nationalization of the youth over in Russia. And now it's mixed, but yes, continue.
Well, that's the other thing. Like, there were branches of, the Boy Scouts, the Venture Scouts, who were just, Boy Scouts that did specifically high adventure stuff that were co-ed. It was specifically the Boy Scouts of America were not a co-ed organization. But when I was at scout camp, they would have like international exchange students basically, but for scouts. And I'd go to Ramsburg in southern Indiana, and I met a German scout who was like a 17-year-old girl. I was like, wait a second, what are you doing here? She's like, yeah, it's kind of weird that you guys separate this by gender. Oh, you guys don't do that? No one does this. Like, oh, well.
But you know what they did do back then? And I mean, this will kind of lead into one of my points. Maybe we start it now. Maybe we can circle back, as we have conversed about the Boy Scouts before. And the thing is I do think, because there's also, when you were talking about, essentially you've got like beliefs versus behaviors, or I think there are some messaging problems. Sometimes if that's what young men are hearing, on one hand, yes, they're hearing it. On the other is like, should we tune the message maybe, or how this is delivered to certain groups? Because it's come up before, but anybody that doesn't know, I'm a market researcher by trade. So I have a master's degree, Technical University of Munich, in human behavior. And that's why the problem is the perception exists. And what we want to get into is, why that does. Following on from that, into the Boy Scouts, is a lack of structure. I mean, I think there used to be more groups, both for young men and, as we got older, clubs and stuff like that. A lot of that structure is missing. And those were spaces where, at least theoretically, older or more mature men could guide younger ones, like say some of this stupid shit. Like, they're not going to say it when women are around necessarily, and they can be corrected. And so in Germany, for example, it was, I think in 2011 is when they got rid of conscription. And now, you could do public service where you serve a little bit longer and do things like at nursing homes and stuff. But, you still had, that was still a place where a lot of like young men from across Germany, different backgrounds came together, trained together for at least 9 months. And, we can get into it more later, but I would like to see some kind of national service could actually solve a lot of these issues by forcing all kinds of different people together, right? I mean, I think that should be co-ed, but I do think there's an argument to be made that sure, there are sports teams, but speaking as a coach, like there's so much you can do nowadays. I mean, you got to focus on the practices. Then with good intention, things like safe sport, like you are limited in, interaction with young people. Like, I understand why, but I think the pendulum has swung a little too far. But, how can we still have spaces, or like in the Boy Scouts, maybe if there's a breakout group or something, right? Or a club that is by gender, because you're not going to know what these guys actually think. And again, we used to believe a bunch of dumb, wrong shit, right? But like, unless they feel they're in a space where they can say it, but that also means it's in a space where it can be corrected, right? Because I guarantee you those guys weren't in DEI training or around everybody saying like, I feel like this is saying that white guys are bad, but they say it to you as a dude afterwards.
But what is to say that, I mean, just me and you talking, sometimes you have said stuff, it was always via text, so I couldn't like hear any like tone of voice or anything like that. Or I'm like, yo, Eric, I don't think that's a great thing to say, man. and so I don't understand, like, again, maybe I'm just Grandpa Simpson or Principal Skinner just not getting it. But it's like, I think that is a core duty of those kind of groups to correct bad behavior. Like, hey, you can't say that, man. That's kind of shitty. That's racist. That's misogynist. That's whatever.
You're basically you make it sound like right now we should clarify some things before like that makes it sound like I'm saying.
Oh no, it was a complete misunderstanding. It was something. It was something about like your
I remember what it was.
Trying to like convert you to being gay. I was like, so that's kind of like not a cool thing to say, even jokingly.
This was how the house looks as much when she is gone, so I can actually have big dinner parties, and they are excellent hosts for us. So, but regardless, I mean, but part of that too gets into this, right? Like, it's the communication. So we're texting. You could text faster because I think I was on my phone at the time. You were probably
because I text from my keyboard because I'm on a Mac and you're a
I had to like
over on the Windows Android
download the app for it because on WhatsApp I type. But anyways, I had to go in the browser to like provide context for Jack and our continuing conversations. But we lost this. We weren't conversing person to person. The context behind all this was lost.
Yeah.
And taking that even further, because there's a lot of young people now communicating just via text or Discord or whatever. But also taking that even further is when, they're hearing these messages from podcast hosts or whatever. Well, that's an entirely one-way conversation.
Yeah. I don't disagree that we need those kind of spaces. I don't understand why they can't be co-ed. And that may be just a Jack, you're a fucking weirdo kind of thing, which I'm willing to accept. Because I had friends my bosom buddy, as the woman who babysat me would have said, nice old lady from Tennessee, raised out in the sticks, had some weird ways of saying things. My best friends in high school were both girls and boys. My wife was one of my closest friends before we were both we kind of like each other in a different kind of way. And then, eventually got married. But that's why I just don't understand how this is a difficult or problematic thing. And maybe, and again, I'm perfectly fine with that just being a thing about me that's weird.
No, it's not weird. I mean,
but it's also, it's unfortunate that so many of these spaces, like third spaces and organizations, don't exist anymore, because it's part of what pushes people into online echo chambers. It's why people end up on Discords and subreddits instead of meeting in person, because we have completely removed the ability to be in public in a lot of places without having to spend money. And it sucks. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, so the public space for me was often the school's grounds. And so for band stuff or for track and cross country, I was there for that. I would show up early and hang out with my friends an hour early, and we'd just chill there. And it was just normal because we all lived in the middle of nowhere, and that was the public space to go to. I'm not sure that we could do that today, just because the school would have some liability issue with it. And I'm not disagreeing that there is an issue that people are facing. It's just the solution that was landed upon by a lot of people, not saying a majority or even a strong minority, but just the idea that we need to get rid of the things that made the world as nice as it was for you and I for the last 20 or 30 years. That we need to scale back things that help people who aren't straight white Christian men. And so getting rid of those things, and actually the numbers are in from the first year of getting rid of DEI initiatives in colleges, is that white men have a lower enrollment rate now than they did before affirmative action was declared to be unconstitutional. So it's clearly these things aren't exactly helping you or doing what you thought they would. You were sold a false bill of goods. People told you that and you decided that they were wrong. Fine. Doesn't mean that you have to continue being wrong. And as you mentioned, it's part of... Huh?
I guess it's just kind of before we move on, but I think it's not a zero-sum game, right?
Oh,
this is something I'm just kind of thinking out loud on is, you talked about the third spaces and hangouts. I mean, I totally agree with that. But, going back in the day, I've always had, friend groups that were, sure, I had all my guys, but even then we usually split kind of gender-wise. My female friends, I've always generally worked in women-dominated industries. I spend a lot of time, women, no issues there. Clarifying, no issues there, everybody. I think out loud. So
you're not like Mike Pence, so you don't have to go and you don't have to have Mother in the room with you.
Mother.
Talking to another woman.
Mother, may I speak with her? No. So, but my point is, it's I agree that yes, on the one hand, there do need to be co-ed spaces, co-ed groups where you learn that, hey, this other gender, they're people too. And we're actually quite similar and we can be friends like that. Right. But I think there is legitimately an issue though too with, and again, this is one of the things that I think a problem that they're facing is a safe space. I know some people aren't going to want me to put it that way, but a safer space for men where there can be that kind of engagement between, guys that have been through different life stages. I won't use rugby for everything, but it's kind of
you can say some dumbass shit and no one's going to get real mad, but they will correct you maybe.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. And they're not going to say the dumbass shit if there's girls around a lot of times, right? Possibly. Or if they're afraid.
I have never had this problem. It has left to me getting smacked by many women.
Yeah, but yes, but you never even some of the stuff that's getting said. I mean, yes, we had.
I was raised in rural Indiana.
Yeah, I was about to say
women might technically still be legally property of their husbands in the county I grew up in. I'm not sure about that.
But I'll even speak for myself. So, I'll even say that's why I even feel the need to be to preface this with, this might sound bad, but speaking as a man, I if I'm seeing like a therapist or even kind of like consulting with somebody for advice, or maybe a guru or something, if you will, I personally prefer talking to a man. Female therapists, all that, they were great, but for me personally, it's not that I value their opinion more, because there's a lot of things that I know, and especially the way we grew up in the time period, each of our parents, all that these deeply ingrained, at this point, maybe just feelings or emotions, or ones that lurk, or opinions about ourselves and how we should be, right? Like, I know that they're illogical. And I've found sometimes speaking with, a woman, like, they'll point out that that's illogical. And I'm like, yes, but at this point, this is not like a cognitive thing. It's like a deeper seated thing. And at least, a man would.
Is, I know it's my. I know this is not true, but it's hard to convince my brain of that.
Well, exactly. Like, but a man's more likely to be like, hey, like, yeah, I know where you're coming. I know what that feels like, or I know where you're coming from, right? And you can have like, and again, they may end up saying the same thing. It's illogical. But there is kind of an understanding, and then maybe asking them like, okay, well, how have you addressed this or something, right? Like, kind of walk me through that, since they've gone through the experience. And now I want to be clear, I'm not advocating that your therapist should have experienced everything you have, like that. The same, you need the outside perspective, but that's more comfortable for me, or I know I can say things where I'm like, I know this isn't right, but again, this is like, it's in here and I know I need to address it. Or hell, even like feelings of anger, right?
Yeah.
Flash tempers, like some very male heavy things are better addressed by them. So that's why it's like, how do we find this balance, right? Because on the one hand, they need to be as exposed to genders, sexualities, beliefs, socioeconomic classes, all of this together, but then also have that, safer space where they can be open and, they can be guided or hear from other men. So
yeah, no, I don't disagree with that.
Do I have an answer to that? No. Well, yes. How about national conscription? Everybody, bring back the draft.
Man, no, oh God, no. I will drive to Indiana and hit you in the face with a fish.
I am better at trousting. Bring it.
No situation that I was ever in Afghanistan or Iraq that was kind of hairy would have been made better by some of us having been forced to be there by the government. It all would have been worse.
Find the national service.
Yeah, proponents of the draft clearly have never looked up the statistics on fragging your off, which used to be a pretty big problem in Vietnam.
My dad was an infantry second lieutenant back then. Fortunately, though, he only had to keep he was a guard, but since he worked in the steel mills, like, didn't get deployed as like an essential worker, but a lot of guys his unit did. And that whole, how many days or whatever are you supposed to actually make it there?
Yeah, but I don't remember. I think it was like 2 years.
But to everyone in Chicago, Second Lieutenant Glenn Albert Larson did keep the Viet Cong out of South Chicago.
There was more than that.
He could have gotten fragged too.
He's just out there, Captain America, keeping the South Side safe.
Yeah.
That leads us to, how do we agree? How do we disagree? What can we do just as a group, as men, to help the situation? And for me, that starts with understanding that the wrong assessment was made, or an assessment that isn't quite accurate was made by a lot of young people, and to help correct it. Not to say that you are wrong and that things aren't bad, but the cause and the solution aren't necessarily correct. If you feel that you have been left behind by people who aren't centering you in all of existence, it's like, well, shit, there's a lot of people here. Half the population is not you. I don't know what the demographic breakup of America is anymore, but I know that soon we will be in a situation where we'll be more of a plurality.
It's already happened in the in Gen Z and younger.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's just a thing where things change, life changes, and when you try to hang on to these ideas about what the world used to be, oftentimes they are not. They are rose tinted and they are not exactly representative of what that was. And it's on us, like older guys, not that me or Eric are old by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, there's some stretch, but we don't feel it. Yeah.
40 is awfully old when you're 20. But when you're 40, it's like, I'm not old yet. But it's one of those things it's on us to help guide and to support the what is actually going on and how to correct it. guide that narrative and pass it on. And it's not to say that Eric and I are right. A world as defined by me would be undeniably amazing for a very small group of people. It would be very annoying for lots of other people.
But then the other people would actually probably it wouldn't last. Somebody would take advantage of it. And then we're all under the Jack and I are against the wall, but it always backfires.
If you have no walls, you can't be pushed up against them.
Fine. Ditches.
The Idi Amin solution to keeping houses clean was to knock them over. My solution to not being backed against a wall is to make walls illegal. It's part of it's on us to help correct that solution, but also we have to do something that I find to be difficult, not because I want to be a cantankerous old asshole, but because I look at a lot of this stuff and be like, I'm a dumbass and I figured it out. You don't have an excuse. And that is to have some empathy for young men who feel adrift and understanding that.
Because they are adrift, but yes, continue.
And a big part of that is understanding that I don't know what it's like to be them. I lived a similar kind of thing, but it's not the same.
But you know what it's like to be adrift. And that's the thing.
Oh, fuck
that's what we're getting at. Yeah.
Fuck yeah. And I have to be able to, I have enough information that, I know what was like for me that I can maybe contextualize it and give some guidance on what to do in the current. But like at the core of it is I don't understand this. And I need to remember that before I get very frustrated and start calling people names, which I am prone to do. And then like as an individual level, if you know young men in your life, and Eric, you do this already as a coach, offer help and guidance, or just be there as a person in their life that says, hi, how are you doing it? And then be genuinely interested in that. Being someone's friend and seeing them as a person is something that they might not have a lot of, especially if someone is deep into the hustle culture, the grifting nonsense where it sees everyone as a mark, basically, which this isn't different than a multi-level marketing scheme. That bullshit is not different than Amway. Is seeing every one of your friends as a potential client? Like, fuck no. I'm interested in how your day is doing simply because you're a person that exists, and I'm curious, and I hope everyone has a good day. Like, having that kind of interest in your fellow humans that you're with can be life-changing sometimes, especially if they have some type of after work or the activity that do show up for that. Be a good friend or a cheerleader in their existence. I'm hoping that they'll, have things work out the way they want to, because no one really asked for this situation except for the assholes who created it. And those are very few and far between, and probably not the people that any of us around during the day. And as unfortunate as it is, you didn't ask for it, but your life didn't prepare you for this, which I understand deeply. Coming from the middle of nowhere, Indiana, to have to exist in a highly technological world was very difficult, even when I was doing it 20 years ago. And like just not getting the cultural difference between how things are in a town of 200, most of whom are like retired factory workers, versus, a place like Atlanta or a place like Indianapolis or New York or LA. There's huge cultural differences. There's shit's different. And learning how to navigate that isn't necessarily easy. And it was a lot easier for us in that no one was filming us all the time. There were no smartphones. There were no TikToks. There was no Twitter. There was no flock cameras. We're just firmly in the realm of dystopian science fiction where mass surveillance belongs, not in reality. And so I didn't have to contend with the idea that if I fuck up, someone's going to see it and the whole world's going to see me having fucked up. And I've never been a person who gives a shit about what other people think to a great degree. It's not like, oh no, someone saw me do something dumb. It's like, no, I hope they saw me do something dumb, because I do dumb stuff all the time for fun. But more of a like, shit, I might not get a job because of this. I don't have to worry about that.
Well, the problem though is that's causing a lot of the social anxiety too, right? I think it can be taken too far. Like, I thank God that a lot of stuff I did or said when I was younger was like, for us, neither of us would probably be here. I don't know how many alleged felonies and stuff may have occurred. It's also like a barrier, right? Because when I'm out, sometimes with like younger guys in the club, we're at the bar, we're on the road, so we're partying after match. I'm like, hey, go. So you guys are good looking, professional, like get your shit together, guys. Like, go talk to these girls. And they get worried about it. And I'm just kind of like, all right, like I'm married, but I'll be a wingman, fine. Just I'll go start the conversation. You can come over. And things go well. But they're like, they're so worried about getting filmed and like put up online, like, look at this creep. But to me, where it's like, okay, I see that can happen, but also like it won't happen if you just don't do anything creepy. But like, how do you learn to not be creepy if you don't practice it? Yeah, well, exactly, right? But I can see how, like, if they don't engage, like if you haven't done this, like that's, we're just so used to rejection, and there's a certain amount of resilience back then. Like that's a practiced, I probably said weird shit while learning all of that. Like just,
oh my God, a girl that but you remember
Redacted.
well, I dated his sister, right?
So one day there's this girl that he had kind of dated that I thought was cute. He wasn't dating her anymore. I was like, hey, send me up with her. And he's like, cool, give her your number. She called me and my autistic ass, she said, what are you doing? I was like, oh, I'm cleaning out my cat litter box. And she's like, okay, I gotta go.
Just like, well,
it's like, you asked me a question, I gave you an honest answer. What do you want from me, lady? Saying dumb shit and weird shit, it's just, like I said, it's part and parcel of who I am, so I'm used to it. But
you didn't say that again. It's like a learning process, right? And so it's crafting your, like,
and it's one of the things where, like, well, Sam and I started dating when we were in high school. We've been together more than 20 years and are coming up on like 20 years of marriage. And so it's one of those things where, like, if I had to like figure out how to date people again, that'd be so fucking weird. But at the same time, I think it wouldn't be, because it's pretty simple. If the vibe seems to be there, I'd be like, hi, I'm Jack and I think you're cute and I'll get to know you. If this is weird or bad for you, tell me to go away and I will. That's all I'm going to say. I'll be over there if you want to talk, and then walk away. If they want to come talk to me, that's great. If they don't, that's fine.
Yeah, and you get more comfortable with that time. And that's why I think, one thing that we do forget, you kind of alluded to this earlier, talking about being more comfortable with yourself and all of that, is like you really have to step back to remember some of the anxieties that we had. And so even though, and that's the thing for young guys to know too, is even though things were externally different, back in our day, like a lot of these same feelings were there, right? Like being anxious, feeling adrift. And that's why you ask what, older guys can do. And I'm very careful around giving advice, right? Or especially like unsolicited. Now we do have, as I've told you before, like with the rugby club, like kind of coffees at the clubhouse where, especially even older guys, like, talk to each other, and like younger guys come to and ask for advice. There's certain ones like that, but I think more consistently what's better is just being more authentic and frankly kind of vulnerable, maybe around some of these younger men in your life, because Gen Z, speaking as a market researcher, they are huge on authenticity and trying to find something that they believe is genuine and authentic. Now, does that sometimes lead them down, bad paths? Like, yes, but that's
yeah. Important. Just because someone's genuine doesn't mean A, you should listen to them, or B, they know what the fuck they're talking about.
Yeah. But well, exactly. And that's, you get your ortho bros.
That includes us.
Yes.
So
that's why
in earlier episodes, you shouldn't listen to a fucking thing we say, because we're two dudes on the internet who don't know you. We might have some good ideas, but at the end of the day, no one should be doing, I'm modeling my life on Jack's because of X, Y. No, fuck no, do not do that. So many bad decisions. Don't make them.
but that's what you do, right? Is instead of saying like, oh, this is how I ended up handling it, or at least not leading with that, let them ask, or this is what worked for me. Say, it's like, look, yeah, I was in that place before. This is how I fucked up. Maybe avoid that. And this is how I talk about startups and everything too. It's right. Like I've become an expert in knowing what doesn't work and how failure happens. Just because something works for one company doesn't mean it's going to work for others. Failure tends to be far more universal. What doesn't work for a company most likely isn't going to work elsewhere. And once you know a whole hell of a lot about what not to do, if you just don't do those things, you're most of the way there towards success. And so that's what I mean. Kind of being authentic or being vulnerable is like, hey, when I was just going through this, and this is how I fucked that up. And, if nothing else, even though I ask you for more, it's like, there's that connection. You can build on that later. Or if they're coming into certain periods of life where there is crisis, like, okay, coming out of college, especially, we graduated into the recession, and I've got stories about that.
You graduated. I dropped out and did other stuff for 10 years.
Oh yeah. Well, you dodged the bullet on that. I have this theory. I've told you about it, and we can dig into it maybe in another episode. 28 is when what I call the quarter life crisis hits, or at least that's the median age for it. So maybe you're 27, maybe you're 29, maybe it's a bit early at 26, but 28 in particular, you've been working for several years, right? And you really start questioning, like, is this the rest of my life, right? Or what am I going to do? What am I going to be? You start feeling a bit older. You're not old. Hell, mentally, I still feel 23, but at 28, stuff's a little different, right? There are some of the physical things.
This is also called Saturn's return.
The what?
Saturn's return.
Said, oh, well, I'll have to ask you some more.
Because it takes about 30 years for Saturn to orbit the sun.
Shortly before Saturn's return. A period where that's when I was so burned out from tech startups, the company had gone under, I wanted to follow my passion, right? That's when you start thinking about joining the Peace Corps or something like that. Like in my case, it was working in wine. Until I realized all the negative sides of that business. And I really derailed things for a while. But that is a period of crisis. And for us guys, if you're older, like we can all identify with that quarter life crisis. And so if you know people like kind of coming into that, again, don't just lead with unsolicited advice, but if you're having a conversation, maybe lean into like, hey, I had kind of a rough time when I was, your age.
There's a very different version of this that is much more limited, but it's a lot of veterans, especially enlisted veterans, when they get out, especially if they had a combat arms job, it's like, what the fuck do you do? Like, in the words of a recruiter who steered me away from an infantry role, there ain't a lot of use for trained killers in the world, Jack. Fair enough. I'll go be a comm guy. Be a network engineer. There's this, you get out, you were in an environment that it's highly socialistic in that your medicine, your housing, and your food is not ever a thing you have to worry about. That's always there. The quality of it may vary, but you were never going to be homeless, hungry, or unable to see a doctor if you need to. Allows you to focus on your job. But that job happens to be something that there's not a real great need for outside the military. Or in like my case, the way the military does computer networks doesn't necessarily translate into the civilian world very easily, especially because like the kind of stuff we were doing, there's not a whole lot of civilian need to go out and like set up a network operations center in the middle of a field that has like its gateway be a satellite that like you carry around in the back of the truck. Like there's this job doesn't exist in the real world because information infrastructure is wildly more advanced in some ways than the way the military does it for field operations. And so you exit this environment where everything is taken care of for you. All you have to do is worry about staying in shape and being good at your job. And if that job was something that translates well into the civilian market, maybe it doesn't in the way that you're able to explain. So it's a barrier to entry, because you may not have a degree at this point. And so, yeah, you've got 4 to 6 years of experience doing this highly technical job, but if people are only hiring someone with a degree, then you're kind of screwed. Or if you're in combat arms, it's like, unless you want to wear some very short shorts and run around in the southern part of the continent of Africa and fight for some very dubious causes, you're not going to be having any type of good luck with employment. And I know a lot of guys, especially like they did combat arms, sure, but that doesn't mean they want to be a professional infantryman all their life. They want to do other shit, And so you exit into the civilian world, which even without all of that is so fucking different. And you've lost this group of people who were closer to you in some ways than your own family. And it's like, what the fuck do you do with yourself? I don't agree with the roads some of these guys take that led them to like the Oath Keepers or white supremacist organizations or any of that. I certainly don't condone any of those things, but I can kind of understand how they ended up there when everything else fails them. Or in the case of several of my friends, they just end up checking out. Like they're done with life. And before they were 30, they were gone through their own decision. And so when I say I understand how it can be difficult, that's the way and how I understand it can be difficult. Some of my best friends have been gone longer than, I cared to think about, because they could not find a way to exist in the world after they were done going off and doing their national service. So it's one of those things where whether you're 28 and trying to figure out if working for, whatever big company or small company is all your life's going to be, or if you're, 22 to, 28, getting out of the military somewhere from your first or second enlistment, and like, what the fuck do I do to be a normal human again? It's not easy. It's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to navigate. And I think that's why our dynamic works pretty well, Eric, because we between the two of us, we've seen both sides of that. And so you know, it's part of that having and understanding and remembering that the empathy that you need to possess for people who do not understand how to make it forward and make a good life for themselves in a world that in a lot of cases is designed to make sure that life is not good. But that's why we're here. We should be here for each other. As much as just being like, hey, how are you doing? And actually meaning that when you ask somebody, like, if you can help somebody, help them. Even if that's just like moving a sofa, or, whatever it is, like go and be helpful. That's a good way to develop a friendship, with somebody. And to remember that everything in our life isn't necessarily centered around an app and a screen. It can be centered around, being there for each other as another human. And I think you've told me about it, Eric. A lot of times, support group for men, support groups for men are often centered around a third activity that is not related to what they're talking about, like fixing a lawnmower or something like that, because it's a space that men feel that they can like be safe and share. But in the same way, I think another thing that plays into that is that you are also doing something productive for someone else or for yourself, and you have support in that productive thing you're doing. I think that's a kind of a subconscious play there that happens that isn't necessarily recognized when people talk about these kind of things. But yeah, I didn't mean to drag us into a dreary tone there.
No, I mean, actually, it's perfect because I mean, I think part of it too, and as you were talking, what I was thinking is I think identity plays a large part of this, right? And, while we have more in common than, not, one thing like in common is the fact that we have developed a strong or quite strong or getting there, strong sense of like self-identity, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing going into your late 20s is so think of all these guys you served with, and speaking even for yourself too, like being a Marine, or especially guys that are in like combat arms, like that is an identity. And I think a lot of people make that their identity because it's easier. And then when that's taken away from you, you really have to face like, are you searching for what you want to do with your life, or are you searching for another strong external identity? And that's much harder, especially in the civilian world. But except Oath Keepers, those groups, it's like they do offer a certain identity.
They certainly do.
Well, even with rugby, and why? Well, exactly. I don't know, but it is an identity. But
say what you want about the tenets of National Socialism. At least it's an ethos.
At least it's an ethos. Yeah, nihilist Lebowski. But I think that's also why you get a lot of veterans who then come into rugby clubs and find support, because something that I still personally, I don't know that I'd say struggle, but maybe a little bit, is I have played and coached for over 20 years now, maybe like 25 years, off and on. But, you get respect just by saying that like you play rugby, right? And being a rugby player. And we have a saying that everybody wants to be a rugby player, but not everybody wants to play rugby, right? Because it is brutal and it is kind of almost the blood price of like belonging. And that's like a bond. But, especially as you get older, is like, how much of it is, and you think about not playing, right? Like hanging up the boots. And it's really, really hard because you have to separate like how much of this is just my love of playing. Like I've told you again about the Zen qualities of it, right? Nothing else matters for 80 minutes. Like when you're out there, the external world disappears. Or how much do I enjoy the camaraderie? Like, yes, you could still be part of the club, but like, and you'd still have all these friends, but you would feel, oh, maybe I'm not earning it right as much. Maybe it is tied to the playtime. But also, like, you like being a rugby player is an easy identity too, right? And it is part of my identity. It's not the whole thing, because I see myself as someone who has farther interests in being and what I want to be, and hopes and dreams, and I have an identity, but it's a strong part of it, and it always will be. But it's like safely assimilating that into a broader identity. I think same with like the military is as well, and young men. But sometimes it's like maybe don't even realize that what you're missing is that identity, right? Like you feel left behind, or you feel something's absent in your life, and it's really kind of comes down to who are you, right? And who do you want to be? And that's really a separate process that external factors, aren't truly going to do for you.
One of the things that I always talk about my service to people is something that I did. Then I went and did other things. I know people who never moved past that point in their life. Not in a way of pitying, but just like I feel kind of bad because like I would hate to be stuck there because it wasn't necessarily a great time or place, right? But it's definitely I never looked at any of this as I'm going to do these things because it's the kind of person I want to be. It's I must be this kind of person because I like these things. So therefore, and I think a lot of people, I think the wrong thing that a lot of people take a lot of time to figure out is that they dump a lot of time and effort into trying to be something they're not. And they build up an unacknowledged resentment that I did all this stuff, I worked so hard, I'm still not successful in this way that I want to be successful at whatever I'm doing. And then they take that and turn it into just more negative energy pointed at something else. And it just eats away at instead of saying, well, no, fuck that. I don't like any of this anyway. So why am I doing it? I'm going to do the things I do like doing. And because I do these things and I enjoy doing them, that must mean I am this manner of person, which sometimes is hard to admit, especially if that manner of person is something that you have never, not necessarily culturally been suggested or promoted as something that you should want to be or is laudable or anything like that. An example is my mom wanted me to play basketball so goddamn bad. I'm the only 6'1" guy in Indiana who hates the sport of basketball and refuses to play. My mom wanted me to play basketball because she thought I'd be good at it, and I hate basketball. I don't enjoy sports in general, unless they are very, very simple things. Like I will pick up an iron ball and throw it. I'm perfectly happy to do shot put all day long. That's just how I am. Baseball, I enjoy it. I enjoy it as a sport, but if you start talking to me about statistics, eyes will glaze over, and I'm like, will you leave me alone? I'm watching this baseball game. I would, for a lot of elementary school, middle school, and into high school, try to figure out how to get good at basketball and like try to like be around this thing that I just did not like. And finally, I gave up on it. I was like, yeah, fuck it, I'm going to do this thing. I cannot find a way to enjoy it at all. But there's a path that a lot of people don't have the ability to step away from for whatever reason. That it's just kind of baked into me to be like, nah, fuck, if I don't like it, I'm not going to do it. I don't care how many other people do it. I can be successful at life without doing this other abstract, inconsequential thing. And I think there's a deep discomfort for that kind of mentality among young people, and I don't understand why. It made sense when we were young because you didn't have access to the rest of the world. Your local community, your physical community was all you had. But when you can find where you fit in, who you fit in with, isn't necessarily sitting next to you through a thing that you carry around in your pocket, it's like, damn, there's no need to conform to shit that you don't agree with. Just like go do your thing. And the weird thing is older Gen Z figured this out, younger Gen Z didn't. And it's one of those things that like I don't understand what the fuck happened to younger Gen Z other than the pandemic being when like right in the middle of when they would have been like, I'm an adult now, or I'm entering the world. But we have been talking for quite a while.
Oh, let me just finish on we'll do just following your thought. Just briefly. But I hear what you're saying. The other thing is also though, you don't want to drive people away from the people that are around them, right, in their community, because that's the thing about it. You have to as an adult
burn all your bridges. But you don't have to like if everyone likes spaghetti and you like rigatoni, it's not a big fucking deal.
But I think a lot of this does start early is when men start constructing the mask. So again, me being authentic or vulnerable is, that I've told you about my trip out to Esalen and all the awareness and meditation practices and stuff I've been doing, is that I felt I hadn't really lost myself, but it was kind of hard separating what had become a mask, right, and what was truly authentic. Things started to blend because especially like in small business.
When I first realized I was autistic, I had a big problem with that. Like where is the Jack that you've constructed over the last 40 years of your life to figure out how to exist without harm from others versus like where does that stop and where do you begin?
Yeah, well, and that was like my ADHD diagnosis like a year ago, and then also realizing and potentially on the spectrum I haven't gotten through all of that. But it's like, oh yeah, the commonality and all of my friends. It's like, I was always like, I just have this very diverse friend group, like, very open-minded. And then I'm like, oh wait, we're all neurodivergent. We just find each other.
We did tend to flock together.
Yeah. And it's like, I think about it. Then it all started coming together. But for me, it started. So I moved to a new town in 5th grade. And I'd been in Oklahoma for a few years before that. My dad was teaching at Tulsa University. And I'd been in like the gifted classes, right? Which is just where they put the weird kids back then. Also, lots of early signs of, some of my neurodivergence. But, we moved to Zionsville, and anyone in Zionsville thinks like, oh yes, well, maybe you're Oklahoma gifted, but we're not going to assume that of you here. But I came in, and sure, I played sports and stuff, but I was more open about some of the nerdier stuff I was into, right? Or a bit more like sensitive, and just immediately got bullied. And, so then started.
It's weird that Indiana is less tolerant than Oklahoma in my mind, but continue.
Well, I was with the other weird kids in Oklahoma. Right?
Okay.
And then I got put in with and these kids are still smart. It's not that they weren't, but it was just an environment that I hadn't really been socialized in yet. But the thing is, so that's when I had to start building this, that's when the mask comes on, right? So I building this more brash, like kind of aggressive persona. And I was always like the hard driver, even the hard partier. And then in my career, I started to be the guy that didn't break until I would, but then people would know about it. Had some very unhealthy behaviors because of that. And after starting my company and selling it and going through all of this work shit and fights, I was like the Luca Brasi, right? The hard man at a lot of companies. And I got rewarded for that behavior. Men can be angry and intense. Today, you shouldn't be, but there is there's a certain reward for that. And I was just like, this isn't me. And I was like, I felt empty and awful. And then have really been picking that apart. But I think it does start young, and you are going to be affected by your environment. And the thing is it's and to be completely honest with you, there are times that you are going to have to wear that mask, right? People are going to try and fuck you over, or you're going to have to jump in and defend others. But the trick is identifying that it's a mask and being able to take that off. And there's so many men that I've seen tying both never taking that mask off and really forgetting who they are, or just simply never developing the identity. Like we were talking about, their identity was their job. And that's these guys, just then they retire. What are they? I see this with my own father and what he's struggling with. And, that's why he hung on until 77 as a professor. And who am I? And so, for young guys, especially, yes, hitting that, what Saturn's return is, I do think, even if you don't realize what it is, I think, a big part of these feelings you're having is truly an identity crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have been talking for an hour. We have more to cover because I had another thing that I pulled out of all those. And we still got to talk about what you...
Oh, I kind of fit in my stuff already.
Okay,
it was structural. Yeah.
But we have probably another good hour. So this is going to be our first two-parter. We will be back and talk about the other thing that I noticed, which is an obsession of what others think of them, which we've talked a little bit about, but I think Bear's going more into it.
I unintentionally led us into that because I did forget to read ahead.
It has been wonderful, Eric. I always appreciate your time. Love you, brother.
Love you, brother.
So thank you very much, everybody. We will be back next time, and take it easy.
Talk soon.
Thank you for listening to Annoyed Masculinity. This has been an Annoyed Media production. Thoughts and ideas expressed during this episode should not be considered legal, medical, or financial advice. We are not therapists. We are just two guys bullshitting on the internet. Our opinions do not reflect the official positions or ideas of our employers or business partners. You can find more of our work on Substack, Instagram, and Blue Sky under @AnnoyedMasculinity. We hope you enjoyed the show, and remember to be awesome to one another.